Good morning, and thank you for joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, depending where you are throughout the world. Today, we are going to talk about the ALC series, the amplified loudspeaker controllers from Biamp and Community. My name is Rich Bellando. I am an applications engineer, part of the Loudspeaker Solutions group. Today, also on moderating, we have Francesca Lynch and we have Matt Wolf helping to assist getting this all organized. Thank you guys very much for your help. Again, thanks for joining ALC series amplified loudspeaker controllers. So the agenda, we'll talk about the physical hardware, what's actually present on the chassis itself. We'll talk about some of the features, the DSP, the preset library, and the power matched applications. We will go over in detail Armonia 2.0 and the firmware updates. We have a couple different ways of updating firmware these days, so we'll go over those in detail. Okay, we will look at Armonia 2.0, the system design software live. So we'll go into the software and we'll play around with a few things. I'll show you guys how to set up a quick system, show you some of the tips and tricks that we've learned over the years. And then we'll talk about why ALC and more power for larger applications. And then, like I said, we'll conclude at the end with a follow-up, and then we'll address any of the questions that we're able to get to. We're going to try to keep this within an hour. Might go a little short, might go a little long, but we'll see where we end up. All right, so ALC features. These are compact one-rack unit, 4-channel units and a 2-channel units. The 404 and the 1604 are your 4-channel units. The 3202 is the higher power 2-channel. All have integrated DSP, reducing the need for your external outboard equipment where necessary. You can drive either low impedance or 70-volt, 100-volt distributed systems with these amplifiers. They have a universal switch mode power supply, 400 volts AC tolerant with power factor correction, so these can be used worldwide. Low inrush limiting. So basically when you power these guys on, they will ramp up slowly, so you don't need expensive power sequencers if the system doesn't require that. Very important analog and Dante inputs. So all these models do come with Dante on board, and then multiple assignable backup failover for each channel. And we'll take a look at that while we're inside Armonia. A full matrix of signal routing, all inputs and outputs connected to the loudspeakers. We can show you how to do that. Front panels, they all look very similar. Again, one rack space units. 404 is 400 watts times 4. The 1604, 1600 watts times 4. And the 3202 are larger power output 2-channel, 3200 watts times 2. All have built-in DSP and Dante, as mentioned before. Okay. Just a review of what's happening on the rear panel. You got your AC main input. I believe these ship with 3 different power cords based on the region where they're being used. You have your Phoenix connector outputs, the large Phoenix with the lockdown screws. You have your analog line inputs and your remote level controls. You can actually do remote leveling analog through these if you choose to. You got your remote on off and your system configuration dip switches in the center there. A couple of options for input gain and some other things to switch on and off. Most of that is handled in the software when we talk about that. So most of the time we don't really touch most of these. And again, I'll go over that in the software and show you how that's applied. Alarms, these can trigger GPO alarms if required. And then we have our Ethernet and our Dante ports, separate Ethernet and separate Dante. They are not the same port. They cannot be used universally across each other. Ethernet is only for control and Dante is only for your Dante. All right. When you first look at these, I'll go back to these, you'll see that front panel on the left, that actually comes off. And on the bottom picture on the screen now, you'll see that that panel comes off behind some foam. And you get a couple of buttons for control, a couple of LEDs showing you what's going on, a call button which will trigger Armonia to basically talk to the amplifier. If you want to know which amplifier you're working on in the rack, you can hit the call button and it'll pop up in Armonia. Soft reset, hard reset, self-check, and output attenuators. So there are actually 2, on this one we're showing the 3202, so there's actually 2 output attenuators. So that you can actually attenuate the output of the amplifier channel. On the 4 channels, there would be 4 of those knobs. All right. Digital signal processing in the box. This is the beauty of ALC. 2.5 milliseconds fixed latency. You have independent input and output EQ per channel, providing parametrics, raised cosine, shelving filters, as well as custom FIR filters, much like the ones we have developed for the complete community line. You can delay up to 200 milliseconds on the ins and outs of each group and layer. Active damping control for subwoofers and cable impedance compensation. We'll briefly discuss that. I won't go into too much detail. A lot of stuff here, so we'll try to condense it as much as we can. But peak RMS voltage, RMS current, and clip limiters on each channel. So not just a limiter. You have several different limiters on each channel when you load your loudspeaker preset. And that's essentially the message. We have a complete loudspeaker library that allows users to select the loudspeaker model. You can choose your load impedance or your 70 volt, 100 volt distributed system, the application, and then it automatically sets the appropriate FIR processing and multi-stage limiters just by loading the loudspeaker preset. Okay. The preset also includes the power impedance values, allowing automatically calculate display, the power needs available, proper headroom on each output channel, and then it also shows you the total power draw and headroom available from the power supply. So these amplifiers are very, very, very smart. Okay. This basically removes the guesswork normally required to match loudspeakers with appropriate amplifiers. So as we go into the ArmoniaPlus software later on, we'll show you how to choose, obviously, the amplifiers that we're going to use, and then the loudspeakers. And then basically what happens is the preset that you choose is predefined, basically has all the FIR filters, has all the limiter settings basically built into it. So as you attach those to the amplifiers, the amplifier knows its values and knows what it's powering. So again, very smart. Okay. Some common applications here. So the 4-channel 400 watt ALC 404, most times we're using this for small R series, the smaller I series compact, the IC6s, a lot of times the V series, E series, your E200 series, your 203s, 206, 212s, and 220s, D series, and some of your smaller W series. You can actually bridge this to make it a 2-channel amplifier. That would be 800 watts per channel. Okay, but this is a great option for your larger multi-zone 70 volt, 100 volt distributed loudspeaker systems. That's basically where we use this one a lot of times in our designs. The 1604, this is probably the most common model we sell because of its applications and what it can power. This is going to handle most of your large R series. It's going to handle your I series point source, your IP8s and your IP6s. It's going to handle most of the IV6 module array. We start building larger arrays. We look at the 3202, but for most part, 1604 with subwoofers will handle an IV6 array. Your ENT-FRs and LF systems. Okay, and then future use for LVH and L series. This amplifier will be an integral part of that solution. Again, you can bridge this into 2 channels, essentially making it a 3202. So this 4-channel becomes a 2-channel amplifier. Okay, and again, this is the amplifier we're going to use most when powering the community loudspeaker family. The big guy, 3202, this is 2 channels, 3200 watts. So this is where we start powering larger arrays for IV6. We start powering larger subwoofers. But we also find this very useful for doing large venue projects where, in the example below, you have 3 600 watt devices in parallel, and basically we're giving those a single amplifier channel of an ALC 3202. So you get about a 2.67 ohm impedance with proper cabling, 10 to 12 gauge cable. You can successfully power 3 of these, and this is common when we start doing larger distributed auto systems. It becomes a good solution when there's not an autoformer option in these types of speakers. And again, you can bridge this 3202 to a single mono 6400 watt amplifier. So for applications where you need that type of power, we have that available. So again, output compatibility, your 404, very similar to your Tessera XEL 1200.1 and 1200.2. Basically same applications, small R series, I series compact, V and E, the distributed C and D series, and the W series. And then obviously the 1604, larger power handling, and then 3202 for your most demanding power applications. So ArmoniaPlus is where this all comes together. ArmoniaPlus is the design system software. This is PowerSoft's program. This is the same software suite that controls the entire PowerSoft family of amplifiers as well. We did OEM this ALC model from the PowerSoft line, so you see a lot of similarities with the PowerSoft applications. Ours specifically addresses the needs for the community loudspeakers. So before we jump into the software, we're just going to go through a couple of important settings, a couple of tips and tricks that I'll show you guys here. But we'll do this. These are just screenshots, but I'll show you guys this in the software as well. Networking, obviously we're going to connect to these with an Ethernet cable. You're going to confirm your network settings are active. The bottom of the right-hand screen, once we get into the software, you'll see a little gear next to the British flag, and that's going to access your communication manager. You want to make sure that your network interfaces are active. As a rule of thumb, your networking on your PC, we want set to DHCP. That's the easiest way for these to be discovered. Later on, if you need to choose to set these or lock down the IP addresses for your network, we can go ahead and do that later. But for initial addressing, we recommend just run everything in DHCP, just get everything started. Okay. The next thing we like to look at first is the marketplace. A lot of times, this is probably our most common question when someone first starts using ALCs with ArmoniaPlus. Well, I can't find the amplifiers, can't load them. Okay, well, we have to load the preset libraries into ArmoniaPlus in order for them to be recognized. So I'll show you this in the software as well. I'm going to confirm that your ALC amplifier models as well the community speaker preset libraries are downloaded from the marketplace. And again, you won't be able to connect or load an ALC in ArmoniaPlus without having these in place. Okay. The next thing we'll talk about is the firmware update. And again, I'll show you some of this in the software, but it's very important to keep your firmware updated because if it's not, it will not operate with 2.0 System Manager. So currently the minimum required firmware update is 110.04. And again, any ALC amplifier with outdated firmware must be updated in order to work with the ArmoniaPlus system design software. So we'll take you through a few ways to do that. There are two ways, like most things in software. There's several ways to do things. So we can update the firmware through Armonia, and we would do that through the workspace match and system list tabs inside the software. We also have a new downloadable package that will actually give you all the files needed to run the executables as well. So there's two ways to do it. Regarding the first one, it's important if there's no internet connection. And again, when I showed you, I'll jump back a few screens here. There's no internet connection turned on in your communication manager. ArmoniaPlus won't be able to talk to the internet or talk to the outside, and we still call it dialing in. So whatever communication port has your internet active on, that does need to be on if you're going to do it on this method. Okay. Once it's in there, it'll retain that firmware, but we'll show you that in a second. So again, I'll show you this when we're inside the software. You can basically go from the workspace tab, and you'll see these menus on the top of the screen when we get in there. Workspace tab, other devices, you'll see your ALC devices on the network, as long as your communication manager is turned on and everything is good there. If there is an amplifier that needs a firmware update, it'll simply be highlighted in red. And again, it'll be highlighted in red when your internet connection is operating and working. It's another little trick. Okay, so if that amplifier is highlighted in red, it will need to be updated. And you can simply click the update tab in the top right-hand corner of the screen, and then that amplifier will begin to update. Okay, same thing is going to happen when you're in the workspace. So again, there's multiple ways to do this in the software. From the workspace tab, you would go to match. Okay, and when you go to match and discover, when you discover your amplifiers on the network, you're going to see that there's amplifiers there, and if one is red, okay, that's going to indicate that that firmware also needs to be updated. Okay, Bottom of the window will also give you a quick link. Okay, one device has outdated firmware, click to upgrade, and that is also going to send you back to the system list. Important tip, important update in 2.0. There is now a synchronization button. So that sync must be turned on in order for A+ to exchange data with the amplifier. Okay, so another little trick they added in 2.0 to make sure synchronization is turned on. And again, I'll show you that when we get live into the software. Okay, same thing's going to happen when you're creating a project and you try to match a virtual amplifier to a physical amplifier. It's going to say, okay, that's great and all, but you can't because it's not updated. So you will get a prompt saying your firmware needs to be updated when you try to do a match as well. And again, it's going to take you to the same system list process to do that. Okay. Update tab becomes active, click update, and the process will begin. So when that happens, you'll get the final screen there. You'll choose update. After the firmware installation is complete, okay, the ALC will automatically reboot, shut down, and restart. So if there's any connections or any loudspeakers connected, as a precaution, always good idea to disconnect those. And the firmware update won't affect any loudspeaker or user settings stored in the ALC hardware. It's just going to update the firmware. So that's kind of the way to do it in Armonia, and I'll show you some of those screens once we're in the software. There came an issue with a lot of installations where techs were designing and connecting on site and they didn't have an internet connection for whatever reason. If that's the case, we do now have an option to download the firmware package. So basically the installation package from the biamp.com support download site. Okay, so you can actually download everything you need here and run it as executables. You don't have to do it inside the software. Okay, so when you download that ALC installation package v5, you get the ALC firmware bundle with the current firmware. Right now it's 1.10.04. You will get the ALC models and the speaker preset libraries. Okay, you'll get a PDF instruction, basically highlighting what I'm going to show you on the next tab. And just in case you need it, you will get a fresh version of 2.0.1140, which is the ArmoníaPlus system software. So just by downloading this installation package, you basically have everything you need to get up and running. You get ArmoníaPlus, you get the firmware update, and you get the community preset libraries. Okay. You're going to do this with ArmoníaPlus closed. So if anybody wants to try this on their version right now or later on today, you'll start with it closed. You'll run the firmware bundle, the EXE. Once that's completed, Armonia will open. Then you run the ALC model speaker preset library. You'll click yes to install the package. You'll get a confirmation shown. And then we always recommend just closing and restarting Armonia when that's all complete. So 2 ways to do it. Obviously, once you're in Armonia, you can do it that way as long as you have a good internet connection and everything is synced correctly. Or you can do it the offline version by using the ALC installation package. Regardless, ArmoníaPlus will remember the current firmware once it's been installed. So once you go ahead and do this once, the firmware hasn't been updated, okay, it'll remember it, regardless if you have an internet connection or not. So once that firmware package has been installed, no matter where you go, no matter what amplifier you connect to, it'll be available as long as you're on the same computer, same software. You'll have that on-site, off-site, regardless of where you are, okay? All right, so now let's take a live look into the ArmoníaPlus design software. Okay, I'm gonna toggle my screen here. Okay, so now that we're inside ArmoníaPlus, you will get a start welcome page. And typically here, we operate typically for the ALCs, and for our purposes, we usually live inside the live sound project. With 2.0 in the release, PowerSoft has come out with a bunch of features based around the installed systems. We know a lot of our work is in installed systems, but for the purposes of our use for the ALCs, we're primarily going to use them for, loading and programming and controlling our loudspeakers. Okay, so loading our presets, attaching them to amplifiers, not too much worried about system control and zoning and muting. If you choose to look into that, again, these will work in this suite just like any other PowerSoft amplifier. It's their suite. So if you are familiar with that, you can get the ALCs to work in those fashions as well. But that's we're not going to discuss too much in detail some of the features in the install of 2.0. So most times I tell people when you see this screen, you can just hit cancel or pick a new live sound project. Here I'm just going to hit cancel and cancel out. So this is basically your starting screen. Okay, you see your menus up top, you got workspace, system list, operator view, health plus, okay, and then your bottom menus, design, config, tune, show. And when we do this, I usually tell people we're going to go from left to right, add, link, match, okay? As mentioned earlier, we're going to take a look at our preset libraries at our marketplace. So A+ menu, marketplace. And this is just going to confirm that I do have my preset libraries up to date. I am connected to the internet. Okay, I'm going to show you that as well. So here are my ports, communication manager. Here's my hardwired line going to my amplifier, switch in the rack. And since I'm on a laptop, I have a Wi-Fi connection to my internet. Okay, so these are both on. I highly recommend leaving them on as we go. And that will ensure you're able to talk not only to the amplifiers, but to the internet. So going back to Marketplace, you'll see that I have my preset libraries and then I have my amplifier models loaded. Okay, if they were not loaded, there would be a download link here. If I had a preset library loaded and there was an update, there would also be a download link here as well. Okay, so check in there, everything's good. Okay, so a lot of times we know what speakers we're using, we know what amplifiers we have. Again, working left to right, add, link, and match. So we're going to go with what I know here, that I have some 404s in my rack, and that's what I'm going to be using for this project. So simply going to click on amplifier, and it brings up brand model. Okay, Community Professional, going to select ALC, and I have two 404s that I'm going to design for this system. So I'm going to change that to quantity 2, and I'll leave them unracked for now, and we'll just hit add and close. So on the left, you see we have 2 virtual amplifiers. And I'm just going to zoom these in, and you can make these as big or as small as you want. Okay, so here are my 2 virtual 404s on the left, and then I'm going to add some speakers. So I know we're going to do like a little bar club rec system. So Community Professional. Now you'll see you have all these brands here. If you try to connect another brand's loudspeaker preset to the ALC, that won't work. Okay, so these are locked to only communicate and to load community preset files. All right. So Community Professional, take your pick. You got the entire line here. We're going to do some IC6s. For this space, let's do some 1082 26s. Passive full range. And let's do quantity 4. Okay, don't need to put them in parallel mode. We're not going to do these in high Z mode. I'm going to hit add and close, and we're going to get 4 speakers. All right, and you can basically grab these and move these wherever you want. I know those will be we'll call these the bar area, just for general sake. Okay, and then of course we need some subwoofers. So let's go to speaker again, up top here. We're going to go to Community Professional, obviously, and let's do some V-Series VLF 208 LVs. Now, it's a subwoofer, so this has a 200 hertz high pass filter built into it. You can change this later on. I'll show you how to do that. But when you load the preset library, it's going to load this 200 hertz high pass filter. Sorry, low pass filter. All right, we're going to do quantity 2 of those. I'm going to leave those separate, and we'll hit add. Close that. So now we got 2 subwoofers. Now, just as a quick little thing, if we wanted to, I could hit this and hold down Control and highlight both of these. I can hit Control C and Control V and get 2 more. So very simply, I can add and subtract any amount of these once I have them in here just by selecting them. If I want to get rid of them, I can hit delete, and that can go away. Hit delete, that can go away. And then if we do want to name these on the bottom of the screen there, you can, VLF1 and VLF2, and then our 1082s we used. All right. So we got 4 main speakers, we got 2 subwoofers, and then there's a back area that has some, room for some pendants. So let's go back to speakers. We'll go to Community Professional, and let's go to D series, and let's do some DP6 pendants. All right, and we're going to do, let's see, I think the design called for, let's do 8. So 8 units. We are going to put these in parallel mode, okay? Because these are going to be distributed on a 70-volt system, horizontal. So you do have to match your parallel quantity to your actual quantity, and then we are going to stick these in high Z mode. And then you get an option for your transformers. Okay, so we don't need anything really crazy, so we'll do these at 30 watts. And we'll hit edit and close. So here's our distributed zone. Now the nice thing, when you hover over this, you'll see that we are looking for 240 watts. Okay, it gives you impedance value. Same thing when you hover over any of these speakers, it'll tell you that that's looking for 250 watts, and that's an 8-ohm device. All right, so good checks and balances as far as how you're going to power these. Okay, so when we have that all set up, that looks pretty good. Again, moving from left to right, add, link, match. We're going to go to link. So this is where we now assign the loudspeaker to the amplifier channels. Okay, so this is our first 404, and we know we're going to use each individual channel on here. So we're simply going to click on this speaker, and then we are going to click on the amp channel we want to put it on. So we'll stick that on 1. So ArmoníaPlus will be smart and try to follow along. And yes, that'll be our next one. And then we'll click that one, and then I'll go to the next speaker. We'll click that one, and so on. So now we have assigned 4 full range speakers to the 4 amp channels over here. The subwoofers, we're going to change these around a little bit. So we decided we want a bigger subwoofer in this space. So we're going to move this one down here, and we're going to go back to add. Just for reference here, we'll move this down here, and we know we want a bigger subwoofer for this space. So we're going to delete that. Hit yes. Speaker, Community Professional, and we're going to go to a V2 2112. So double 12 subwoofer, a little more power, a little more bump. Add one of those and close. Now the reason why I did that, going back to link, okay, we are going to take these 2 amp channels and we're going to bridge them because we want 800 watts going to this guy. Give it some good headroom. So click on those 2 channels. You see that the bridge icon becomes active. You can now bridge those 2 channels. So that has now become an 800 watt amplifier channel. Okay. So we're going to now link this subwoofer to that single amplifier channel. Okay. And then the 2 remaining channels, we're going to put on our distributed line. We're going to put our subwoofer, our pendants on this channel, and we're going to put our subwoofer on this channel. All right, so now we've completed this system. We have 4 individual speakers on these 4 channels of this 404. We have a subwoofer using a bridged pair of 404 channels, okay? And then we have a distributed line of pendants on a 70-volt system on this channel, and we have a single sub for this zone on this channel. This way we got tops and subs, everything looks good. All right, so my final process here, moving from left to right, add link match, we're gonna go to match. Now, I would have hit the discover button, and my 2 404s that I have physically in my rack show up on the right here, okay? Before we do that, we do need to remember to click this button here, all right? So that allows synchronization, okay? So changes made in Harmonia will not be affecting the amplifiers until we click that on. So now Harmonia can exchange data with the amplifiers, okay? That is good. So we know the top rack is going to be wired, the top unit's going to be wired to the full range, so we're going to match this to this guy. Okay, and then the second one, orange, we're just going to click on the second amplifier. So now we have matched physical amplifier to virtual amplifier. Now, when we go back to the add screen, you're going to get prompted that Harmonia has detected the state of the following devices differs from the desired one. So pre-select read if you want to read from the device, or send. 99% of the time, since we're creating new files here, we want to send the information we've created to the amplifier. So we're going to go ahead and leave these on send, and we're going to hit apply. All right. So that'll think for a second. And my 2 amplifiers that were on standby have now become active. And the first little indicator you see at the bottom of the screen, it says 2 of 2, and I have a green 2, which means I am connected to amplifiers. Now, this little button here, the arrow button, if you click on that and double click on your 404, we are now inside the amplifier. All right, so this is where all the fun starts to happen. As you can see, my presets are loaded. Okay, so this not only loaded the FIR filters, this also loaded the limiters and all the requirements for this loudspeaker. Okay, we have that going across 4 channels. If I bring up my other amplifier, again, click the arrow, double click the second 404, you'll see that I have a bridged channel, okay, for the subwoofer, and then I have 2 independent channels for the D-series pendants and 1 for the VLF 208 LV to match up with these pendants. All right. So once you're in there, you can toggle back and forth between the 2 amplifiers on the menus here. But now is where we start to get into the fun. So this is your scheme. This basically shows you an overview of what's happening in the amplifier. Okay. Source selection. Now, if we're using Dante, if we're using analog, this is now where you set your source priorities. Okay. So you have input channel 1, input channel 2, input channel 3, or input channel 4. So going back to 1, we're running this as a completely mono system, and we're not going to use Dante today. We're going to use analog. This will simply fall over straight to analog. So out of the box, you really don't have to make this setting. Out of the box, it'll detect an analog signal, and it'll start running off that analog feed. If you want to, for purposes of just being consistent with your work, it's like I do. I like to basically make sure I'm doing everything thoroughly here, and I know I'm using analog, so I'm just not going to use Dante today, and we're going to make input 1 analog 1. Okay, and then we're going to make input 2 analog 2, but in order to do that, we need to get rid of this one. Okay, so input 2, we'll make that analog 2. Okay, so this is basically saying that on input 1, my first priority signal is analog 1. I don't have a failover for the second, third, or fourth position. If I wanted to, and I had another set of feeds, we wanted to put some redundancy in the system, and this is going to be stereo, so analog 1 and analog 2. We could make analog 3 and analog 4 our redundant lines, okay? So then we would remove them from here and here. So essentially you have 4 inputs, okay? They can be analog or Dante, and you have 4 priorities on each input, okay? This will actually select how it falls over. So signal presence is how it's set to. You can set a threshold if you'd like to as well, okay? But this will basically say, okay, once I lose analog 1, this is going to fail over to analog 3, because I know that's my left side and that's also my left side. Again, this is a stereo system. Same thing on your second input, analog 2 and analog 4. Now, if we were doing this on Dante, we'd make this Dante 1, and we'd make this analog 1. So analog is our backup to our Dante. And then this one would be analog Dante 2. And this would be analog 2 as our backup. Okay, so again, you have options to choose Dante or analog and to choose how you want to do your input priorities. If you know you're just using Dante and you don't have an analog backup, you can just force this over, and now you don't have any strategy here. Basically, it's just going to be Dante. Okay, same thing, and you can do that on each channel as well. Okay, so I'll just turn these back on. All right, so that is your input selection. The next tab will be your matrix. So now I'm basically going to tell where I want my Dante 1 and 2 to go. So this is a stereo input, but essentially it's going to be a mono system. So essentially I want to put level on all of these. So I want inputs 1 and 2 going to A, B, C. You can do it that way, and D. So I'm just clicking on this and sliding up, okay? Same thing here, I'm going to click on this and turn this down because I don't have anything on inputs 3 and 4, as you can see. Okay, so essentially Dante 1 and Dante 2 are coming in as a stereo feed, and I'm sending this left and right to A, B, C, and D. Now, if you're doing just a mono system and it was a single mono feed, there's some quick little presets on the top here. You can actually just click on that, apply matrix change, and that'll essentially put everything coming in on channel 1 across all 4 output channels. Okay, same thing with here. But we're going to move these back up this way and do that way. Okay. So matrix, source selection, matrix, advanced EQ. This is where now we can add gain. We can also do some shading. We can do our delay parameters here. You can do it in milliseconds or in feet. Okay. This is where you would do any EQ to the system per channel that you would like. If you want to put a boost or a cut in here. Okay. The next one is the Waze filter. Now this is locked. Okay. So this basically is your factory preset from Community. This is your FIR filter that you can't see. It also has your limiters set and locked, so you can't touch them. Also anti-dampening. You can monitor live impedance in here. And then your diagnostics page basically is for your GPIO alarms off the back panel of the amplifier. Okay. But again, the EQ, the file that we load from the factory is locked purposely. So don't be alarmed when you see that. Okay. The next one is the speaker configuration. And this will basically show you a physical virtual IO of what's going on. You'll see that outputs 1, 2, 3, and 4 full range are connected to a 1082. Okay. And then here is another method for accessing your speaker library. So if there are custom files that we need to send for a specific configuration, we would upload them to the channels through this matrix here. Okay. Here are the speaker presets, and we show that they are locked. If we wanted to, I could unlock these, but I'm not going to show you guys how to do that. But yes, from the factory, that is the sense that they are loaded per the factory presets. We don't want you to really touch those too much. For advanced users and for applications where we do need to get into those settings, we can access them. Okay. Okay, presets, obviously, again, these amplifiers do a lot of stuff. You can set several different presets and actions, snapshots. And then the last tab basically shows your firmware version of the amplifier, your IP address. I can put this in standby now since I'm not really using it. I can go to this guy too and put him in standby. So my fans go quiet, which is great. It'll also show your network. Okay. Dante settings, you can set your Dante settings inside ArmoníaPlus. We still prefer to do them in controller, it's just what we're used to. But you can actually assign your Dante devices for the amplifiers inside here. There's an energy save function. You can actually have the amplifier shut off and then come back on based on a threshold. Management of any disk space available in the amplifier itself. The amplifier actually does have room for audio files that you can upload. And then your power configuration, which basically shows you your voltage, your peak current, your temperature, and then your mains. So this is basically your power draw. Okay, the other thing I want to show you guys in the software, going back to the main menu here, is the Health Plus. Okay, so Health Plus basically is going to give you an overview of everything that's happening inside the amplifier. So you'll show an event history. If there are any active events or alarms, we don't have any. Okay, it's going to show you your inputs and your outputs. It'll show you your speakers. Okay, so if I were physically connected to speakers, I would show impedance loads here, which would be on the next one here. Temperature and firmware, actually measurements would show you your impedance loads. Okay. So a lot of information, a lot of monitoring available inside ArmoníaPlus and inside the amplifier. And we can obviously go into more detail with time allowed. Unfortunately, today is not the day, but yes, a lot of powerful features and a lot of monitoring, a lot of different applications here. All right, so back to the workspace tab. I just want to show you guys some other projects that we can do in here and some other ways to look at this. If I'm just going to close this here and open, go to new and open. I'm going to show you guys a larger installation. We're going to hit cancel. Let's just do test one. All right, so here's an example of a large college basketball facility that we helped lay out for a customer, basically using 1153s. So these are IP8 1153 three-ways, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 clusters, 1153s. They have a single subwoofer in the middle of the court, and they have some R.35 3896 as court fills. So this is a way that you can use the workspace to actually lay out the venue, okay? And this way, when you go into your tune functions on the bottom here, you can now actually mute and unmute speakers, solo. You can see which amplifiers are connected to which speakers here. Shading, delay, polarity, EQ. If I were to double click on this, show the EQ settings. Okay, hit edit EQ. It'll bring up the EQ graph. Back to workspace. So here's one example, and then I'll show you another one we did. So just an example of how you can graphically lay out your system inside ArmoníaPlus. So this is basically just the ease plot, the ease focus graphic that we used in the design of the software. And we basically wanted to start, designing and allocating amplifiers to each zone. So, we have a 3R596 maxes per zone here, and double 18 subwoofers, a distributed system of 3.5 coaxes over the ice surface here, and then 3896 is for the concession areas. So again, just an example of how you can lay this out inside ArmoníaPlus and do your system design and allocation. Okay. All right, jumping back to the presentation, the PowerPoint. Okay. Again, these two examples, wasn't sure I had time to show them in the software, but again, a large format basketball stadium and the ice arena. Okay. So ALC, why do we have ALC? Well, when we start doing larger power applications, okay? So the community product library traditionally has more power required to power these systems. In this case here, we're looking at 12 IV6 1122s. Okay, so a large array of 6, basically 2400 watts. Okay, we're going to use a single 3202 to power both arrays. So yes, a single amplifier is going to power the left and right array, thanks to how IV6 works. But yes, very possible. And then we want matching subwoofers to go with that. Either they're ground stacked, they're flown. 8 IV6 118 subwoofers, 1600 watts, 4 ohms in parallel. You're going to use 13202 per 4 subwoofers. Okay, so essentially this is 3 rack spaces, 17,600 watts in 3 rack spaces. Okay, so very compact, very dense power. You want to start going larger. This happens all the time too. It's very similar to the basketball stadium we just showed. This is using 8 IP8 1153s, all in Biamp. Okay, running the low frequency sections off the 1604s, running the 8 mid highs off another set of 1604s. Okay, and then powering the subwoofers with 3202s. 6 rack spaces, so basically 2 1604s and 4 3202s, giving you over 32,000 watts of system power. 6 rack spaces for your larger sized venues. All right. So again, in conclusion, why ALC? ALC simply provides more power for the more power hungry applications from the community product line. Built-in processing. So not only built-in processing, but the built-in loudspeaker preset libraries makes it very simple to load not only the proper FIR processing for the speaker, but more importantly, the multi-stage limiters. They're basically set automatically. The guesswork behind matching the right amplifier to the right speaker has been solved. Basically, we've done that homework for you. Okay. ALC analog inputs, also Dante inputs. So in the Biamp layout, easily incorporate ALC into Desira projects. Okay. Very easily take advantage of the outboard speaker processing that ALC allows, and you can free up quite a bit of DSP resources and budget in your network audio system. So basically, we're letting the amplifier tune this loudspeaker, process the loudspeaker, and set all its limiters out of the box. No worries there. When you start doing some of these larger network systems, having that outboard processing not focused on your front end actually helps you free up a lot of system resources. All right, guys, so my contact information is here. If anybody has any detailed questions, or if I wasn't able to answer your question completely, please do not hesitate to reach out to me directly. All right, with that, I will say thank you again for attending. I hope this was informative. I hope you have a little more confidence and knowledge about ALC, and hopefully we can get that worked into one of your designs pretty soon. Matt and Francesca, thank you guys so much for your help, and everybody have a fantastic day. Thank you.